Good morning and welcome to this Tuesday edition of Inside India. I'm Sri Jegarajah. Here are your headlines. President Trump escalates his confrontation with India, threatening to substantially raise the tariffs on the South Asian country for continuing to buy Russian oil. India is out with a strong response, however, calling Trump's moves unjustified and unreasonable. New Delhi saying it will do the necessary to safeguard its economic security, as it called out the US and the EU for their dealings with Russia. And from tariffs to India's economic policies, we will hear from former Finance Secretary Subhash Garg. He's coming up and will be joining me later on the programme. Right, let's take a look at the session in our side of the world, and the markets here looking very constructive and keying off what was a strong session on Wall Street. So the payrolls afterburn, it seems, and concerns about a slowing economy seem to be distant memory for the market. It's just the Hang Seng Index over in Hong Kong, the benchmark there, that is flatlining at 24,726. So that's a relative laggard. Elsewhere, we are seeing gains in the order of 1% plus. If you look at New Zealand, Australia, the Nikkei 225 is putting on 0.6%. The Kospi up by 1%. Similar story for the TAIEX. One has to wonder whether it's going to be a similar narrative for the Indian markets, given that the US and India are on a collision course over tariffs and over this issue of Russian oil that we referenced in the headlines. Indian markets will be joining us in about 45 minutes' time. Let's give you Gift Nifty futures and what they are indicating. We were looking at a start in the region of 24,760. So some very modest upside expected, given where we left off was at 24,722. Dollar rupee exchange rate at 87.96. And in tariff news, US President Trump is on the offensive again, this time threatening to substantially hike tariffs on India, once again criticising the country's purchase of Russian oil. President Trump accused India of buying and reselling massive amounts of Russian oil for big profits. He didn't lay out what the new tariff rate would be. Last week, Trump had already announced a 25% levy on Indian goods, plus an additional unspecified penalty for buying Russian products. President Trump has threatened to impose fresh sanctions on Russia and the buyers of its energy imports on Friday if Moscow doesn't make progress towards ending the war in Ukraine. And the President will be speaking to our US colleagues tonight at the times on your screen. Do make sure to tune in. Now, let's get the Indian perspective now. The country is refusing to back down. The Foreign Ministry came out with a rather fiery response to President Trump. CNBC TV18's Parakshit Luthra joins us now. And Parakshit, it looks like the US and India are on a clear collision course.
Simply, the situation and the relations between India and US are at their lowest point in many, many years. India trying to set the record straight with this very strongly worded statement saying that all the actions that are being taken by the United States and the European Union, it's important to see that they've not targeted US alone in the statement. They've also mentioned EU and said that the actions being taken against India are absolutely unjustified and unreasonable. They've also gone on to say that we will continue taking measures in our national interest and in the interest of our economic security. The point that India is trying to make, that we started buying Russian oil when the Ukraine-Russia war began, and there was also a nudge from the US administration, Joe Biden, saying that you can go ahead and buy Russian oil at the price cap, and this is important for strengthening global stability in crude prices. We're also told from the Ministry of External Affairs that both EU and the United States continue trading with Russia. For example, if you look at LNG imports of the European Union from Russia, they touched a record 16.5 million tons in 2024. And the US, on its part, continued to import uranium, palladium, fertilizers, chemicals, and hexafluoride from Russia as well. So negotiations that happen over the next few days will be critical. There is a negotiating team coming from the US to India to see if there can be a breakthrough in talks. But clearly, India is going to be ready and will have to be ready for high tariffs. And exporters in India are also bracing for impact. There are daily meetings taking place, and exporters are asking for some sort of incentive or relief from the high tariffs through a government subsidy or incentive in the meanwhile.
Parakshit, what can you tell us about where the US-India trade talks are? Because I remember the last time we spoke, you were talking about some reports that the Indian negotiators had left Washington. And then there's this date of August the 25th in which we expect their US counterparts in country to pick up where they left off. And obviously, the atmospherics seem to be shot up right now. Where do we stand in terms of the timeline of those meetings?
You know, there are two things happening right now. One, India is trying to placate a domestic audience, a domestic vote bank, which includes your farmers, your dairy farmers, and the media. And the message is that you're standing up for what India needs. You're standing for your national interest. On the other side, we're also trying to placate Donald Trump. Behind the scenes, officials tell us that they want to manage this situation. This is a very critical relationship for India in the long term, and we cannot let it go down. But from all the looks of it, it seems very difficult to have any sort of trade deal at this juncture. Yes, the negotiations are still on. They are negotiating a larger BTA, but any kind of interim deal looks unlikely. What we're told by US industry bodies, including Mukesh Aghi, who spoke to us just a few hours back, the word coming in is that it's important for Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump to have a phone call right now. In fact, sources say this is what the White House wants, that there should be a phone call with PM Modi and they should resolve these issues. A lot of industry bodies on both sides that say that it's important for both countries to dial back on the rhetoric. But just to give you a sense of the kind of olive branch that India is also extending, we have increased our oil purchases from the US, including LNG purchases. Sources telling us that Indian companies are likely to increase their crude oil imports from US by 150% year on year in FY26. In this fiscal, Indian crude oil imports from US in Q1 of FY26 increased by 114% year on year. We've already imported $3.7 billion worth of crude oil from the US in Q1 of FY26 compared to $1.73 billion in Q1 of FY25. If you look at the share of US crude in India's import basket, it has gone up from 3% to 8%. The share of Russian crude has come down this month, but it's still a relatively high 35%. So we're told that India will reduce purchases from Russia, but we cannot cut it out completely. There are complementarities when it comes to Russian crude and Indian refineries, and there is a larger strategic partnership there, but the purchases from the US will keep going up.
Parakshit, you absolutely nailed it, and it's a great point, and it comes down to a cost-benefit analysis, doesn't it, for New Delhi? Do they stop buying discounted Russian crude oil under the price cap, and do they start committing to higher purchases of US energy under a US-India reimagined, perhaps, trade deal? That's what it comes down to, a trade-off. Thank you very much indeed for that, Parakshit. Let's bring in Subhash Garg now, former Finance Secretary of India and former Executive Director at the World Bank. Sir, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Your perspective, how important is a US trade deal for India, and can this be salvaged?
See, I don't see a trade deal happening with the United States. Our positions are so different that there is very little possibility of a reconciliation. And now with Mr. Trump virtually acting like a storm, it's impossible to deal with or to have a deal with a storm kind of thing. Today, he's saying now that India is sort of buying cheap Russian oil and selling it at a profit and threatening penalties. I don't think situation is right at all to have a deal. You can keep the pretense of talking. That will not lead anywhere. You have to weather this storm for the time being, try to contain your damage. You can't give in to all kinds of demands. It's impossible for India to sort of give in to his demands, and therefore I don't see a deal happening.
Are you suggesting, sir, that India should just walk away from these talks and that it would be ultimately in its national interest and national economic interest to do so?
See, you can't walk away literally in such kind of things. You have to keep talking, but don't talk from the point of weakness. From the point of view of trying to sort of give in or surrendering to his whims and fancies, trying to sort of accept all these unreasonable demands. And so you keep talking. If some sense emerges at some point of time, you may have some small side deal kind of thing, which to me also appears unlikely. So you can't walk, keep talking, but don't do anything.
India will do what is best for its national and economic interest, and permitting unfettered market access into India's agriculture sector is not in India's national interest nor economic interest. New Delhi has made that very clear, abundantly clear. If India will not agree to a trade deal with the United States in its current form, then what is the way forward?
See, all countries do what they perceive to be their national interest. So I don't think this is anything great as a point of stating. So America or Mr. Trump, as he sees what is in the national interest of America, is trying to get a deal or to force a deal on India. India would also similarly protect what it considers its interest. You may sometimes end up trying to protect those interests which may not be the real interests. For example, I don't see us sort of being so fussy about protecting the agriculture, dairy or soybeans, GM oils, etc. I think this kind of configuration is the mindset of 40, 50 years back. In current times, these don't. But you are boxed in. You have taken a certain kind of position. And if you do it now, before Trump, then you would be seen as surrendering. And the domestic constituency will simply not accept it. So, but what do you do in the current situation? You see, you look at, we have major exports to America, 85 billion dollars plus or something. And the whole intention is to sort of protect them. But you don't protect the headline number of trade of 85 billion. What is of India's real interest is that what is the profits we make out of it? What is the employment which generates here in those exports items which go to the United States? That's our real interest. But if you are operating on, let's say, profit of 5 to 10 or 15%, and you give in or you reduce your price by 25%, the whole logic of export simply disappears. And therefore, in these circumstances, my sense is, and I think it's quite well considered position as far as I'm concerned, you let there be 25% tariff or higher, whatever. You offer, Indian exporters should offer to them their goods and services at the rate at which they were giving. Don't give any discounts on anything. If there is an American demand, they will buy. And let American consumers and the importers pay the tariff. Let them bear that. It may not battleize. You may have 10, 15, 20% loss of export, but that's fine. What you can't export to America in the meantime, there are two major ways out of that. One, you sort of supply that into the domestic constituency. There is an enormous amount of demand in the domestic constituency. And secondly, you try to diversify your export somewhere else.
Exactly.
Maybe you can sell at 5% less elsewhere and create a demand for that, rather than giving a 25% concession or in price to America.
Can I pick up on that last point, sir? Because India is admittedly well on the road to diversifying its trade partners, trade deals and trade flows, whether it's through deals with the UK, India, EU a trade deal perhaps is waiting in the wings. There's a flourishing GCC, India economic corridor. So on that standard, does India need the United States?
Of course, India need. We have 20-25% of our merchandise export going to United States. You can't wish that away. And there is a big diaspora in America which needs Indian goods. A good deal of the import also sort of satisfies their need. They'll continue to buy, not a problem. But as you rightly mentioned, there is enormous opportunity elsewhere. EU, UK, we have done a kind of deal elsewhere. And if instead of sort of leaving out US completely, it will be great if whatever is the little loss, 10, 15, 20% of the export loss, take it like the Apple or the telecom, about $40 billion of exports to America in any case are exempt. They're not going to get affected adversely. It is the remaining $40 billion or so. If 20% of that is lost out, it's not a big deal. That can be transferred elsewhere. And therefore, there is no point in negotiating with Trump on a position of weakness.
Yes.
Negotiate as equals rather than trying to sort of cater to his whims and fancies.
So just on that point, do you feel India's economy is perhaps on not such a solid footing when you consider a number of factors? Unemployment or underemployment may be understated. There seems to be some cracks emerging within the consumer. Bad loans are rising, credit card defaults are rising. Yes, the rural economy in tier 3, tier 4 cities are in reasonably good shape. We know that. But are there problems that are being overlooked within the broader Indian economy?
So that's not because of Mr. Trump. That's because of our internal policy problems. We have sort of given up or reduced our reform agenda substantially. We have stopped privatizing the public sector entities. There is the capital expenditure, which kept up some of the investment in last 2 or 3 years, is reducing. We have enormous amount of problem on the new industrial technology issues, whether it is the EVs or the solar or the semiconductors or the so that side we have weakness. We have not addressed that. So unless we address those and we have enormous strength on the services side, that is doing well, but that can still do better. So sort of transforming
that's my point, sir. That's my point. Do you feel that this current administration has been expending too much political effort and political capital on trade deals and moving closer towards the Trump administration and not enough attention to domestic structural reform, be it in land, labour, job creation, affordable housing and building a knowledge economy in the long term, importantly for India?
I would tend to agree with your characterization. I think we are overspending our political capital, our economic capital, so to say, to try to get some sort of larger strategic, economic, geopolitical kind of relationship with the United States. I think that's going to hurt us.
Or do you feel that this administration has to take a two-track approach, not only focus on structural reform, but are trade deals in the longer term a necessary stage towards getting FDI flowing into the country that will move the economy up the value chain, move it into advanced manufacturing, higher quality job creation, and ultimately the Viksit Bharat development targets?
That's true. I think we have been over-defensive in our trade deals. Whether it's RCEP or with the EU, we've It's good we have done recently a deal with UK, but most of our deals on trade side has been where we are over defensive, trying to defend the old kind of interests which are no longer relevant in my. Today we are a major agricultural exporter, unlike 1950s and 60s when we used to depend on so much of import. Farming situation has completely changed. We should recognize the new reality. The world, even in the industrial space and all, is completely changing. The new technologies which are required. So I think we should do very large deals with the world. And one of the things which we also must do, and we are not doing, which is hurting us very much, is to learn to do business with China. We've not figured out how do we do business. It's hurting us. We are now $100 billion trade deficit with China, and we paying through our nose.
Very sensitive, though, isn't it, sir? I'm sure you'd admit.
Sorry.
Politically very sensitive. Whenever we broach this subject of Indo-Chinese relations, either economically or politically, but there is a thaw going on.
There is no permanent political interests or positions, right? You take it at a point of time. It's in fact you yourself create that political positions, right? After that Doklam and other kind of things, we became very sort of nervy and sensitive about China. But recently we have started sort of opening up some dialogue. It's coming after 5 years late, and still it is baby steps. I think if we want to do business, we are talking economy and business. The politics should be subordinate there. If we want to do our business or serve our business interest, I think we shouldn't permanently box ourselves into that situation of not doing business with China because we have some political problems.
Understood. So, final question is your take on India's fiscal position. The fiscal discipline that India has been embarking on has been one of the positive catalysts that have been driving investor interest and portfolio flows into India. Is that guaranteed? And how would you describe the systematic taxation reforms that are going on at the moment with regard to income tax?
See, both these questions. It's true that for last 2 years we are trying to consolidate fiscal deficits, make the situations much better than what it is, but we are still running very high fiscal deficits. As against our stated goal, statutory goal of 3%, we are still far off from there. And that is why the government is now consolidating slowly and slowly. That's fair, that should be done. About taxation reforms, unfortunately, on the income tax side, the approach taken is to offer more and more sort of concession to the middle class. Now, incomes up to 12 lakhs in India is exempt. This will reduce the income tax payers, effective income tax payers in the country, to about 1.5 crore, 15 million, so to say. In a country of 145 crore people, or 1,450 million people, only 15 million pay taxes. That's not the real reform. I think we should be doing something to expand our tax base and all. So, this is not really the income tax. What you call reforms or the measures taken last budget is beginning to hurt. If you've seen our 3 months number up to June, there is a reduction in the income tax collection as compared to last year. So instead of having any growth, we will probably have a contraction in the income tax revenue. So it will be fiscally quite a difficult thing.
Numerous challenges. So it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts and analysis. Subhash Garg, their former Finance Secretary of India, and we will be back in 2 minutes. Right, we are counting down to the market open in India, and despite the very constructive session that we're having in the Asia-Pac markets, it is fairly doubtful as to whether India is going to pick up that baton and run with it in terms of the benchmark futures pricing. We're looking at 24,740, which is little changed. So distinctly cautious session ahead, given the balance of risks, especially with the trade and the punitive tariffs front, and India being potentially subject to all of that. Dollar-rupee exchange rate looking softer, actually, as far as the fortunes for the rupee are concerned. And dollar rupee at 87.799. So the rupee under pressure against the US dollar. Now, we are focusing on the real estate sector today. Earnings out from DLF, consolidated net profit rising over 18%, revenue nearly doubled thanks to strong residential property demand and pre-leasing for DLF's new commercial projects. The developer aims to meet or surpass its full-year sales guidance, betting on its new launch pipeline. Right, let's move over to Mindspace Business Parks REIT. The company reported a 24% jump in quarterly net operating income and highlighted confidence in the long-term prospects of the portfolio. Distribution to shareholders increased 18%. The momentum was led by acquisitions, rising rents and growing occupancy. When it comes to the overall REIT market, China is the leader in Asia, but India also emerging as a prominent player, posting a 13% growth in 2024, according to a latest study by Cushman & Wakefield. Let's get into this and get into the REIT space in India. I'm delighted to say Ramesh Nair is with us, CEO of Mindspace REIT. Ramesh, great to have you on Inside India and welcome. First of all, where do occupancy levels stand and where are you putting the outlook for the next 3 to 6 months?
Thanks, Sri, for having me on your show. Our gross leasing last quarter was 1.7 million square feet, which helped us increase our revenues by 21%. Our occupancy went up to 93.7%, the highest we have had since listing. Our NOI is up 24.2% and distribution is up 18%. From a market point of view, what we are seeing, Sri, is exceptional demand from global capability centers. In the last 3 years, demand for global capability centers go from 19 million to 23 million to 29 million square feet. The size of deals in the market have gone up from an average of 35,000 square feet to 55,000 square feet. Vacancy levels, which were around 17%, is in the last 2 years have come down to around 14.5%. Today, American corporations take around 45% of all leasing in India, which is more than Indian corporations, which is at around 38%. And absorption in the last 4 years, we've seen it go from 25 million to 36 million to 43 million to 50 million square feet. So across all parameters, the market looking good, so is the outlook.
Interesting. So just picking up on the GCC side of the business, Ramesh, do you need all these trade deals that India is negotiating at the moment with relatively limited success with the US, of course, to coalesce and to be finalised in order to sustain that GCC momentum part of the business, or are you fairly agnostic about all of that?
Today, the GCCs, Sri, there are close to 1,600 of them in the country, which occupy close to 300 million square feet. GCCs are growing at around 11%. We see this 300 million square feet by 2030 go to around 540 million square feet. Whatever tariffs have been announced recently, Sri, we are only talking about goods, not IT services and software services. There could be an indirect drag because if US companies are spending lesser on their discretionary IT spending, that typically has an impact on Indian IT services. But the Indian IT services slowdown has been in the news for some time for the slowdown. But GCCs on the same side have been growing. So what is happening is the tech jobs today are becoming the GCC jobs. just look at some of these American companies. Like Accenture today has more than 360,000 employees in India. JP Morgan today has more than 65,000 employees in India. And what we are seeing is tomorrow, if the tariffs, because of the tariff, the cost of goods in the US are going to go up. And this will give, I think, the GCCs make GCCs even more attractive to cut costs in non-goods functions like finance, like engineering, analytics, tech support. So I think GCCs are probably the best hedging strategy for American companies against any global trade volatility.
Interesting, Ramesh. But domestically, when you consider what's been happening with some fairly severe news about layoffs within IT services giants like TCS, are you concerned that if that picture worsens, then it's going to slow down activity in that space? Although these are typically, as I understand it, long-term leases, long-term 20-year contracts.
I wouldn't worry too much on that, Sri. I'm just quoting the World Economic Forum data, which was talking about how much AI is going to impact jobs. There's a lot of fear on how many jobs are going to be lost. So World Economic Forum was speaking about how new jobs, 170 million new jobs will be created. 90 million jobs will be lost. That's a net addition of 80 million jobs. In that 80 million new jobs which will be created globally, India could create more than 5 million jobs, so which is second after US in tech and AI jobs over the next 5 years. A lot of jobs which will be created. I think there's an opportunity to create anywhere between 500,000 to 1 million jobs in each one of these sectors, whether it's AI, whether it's machine learning, data scientists, cybersecurity experts, cloud computing experts, big data experts, fintech engineers. I think there's huge opportunity, but it also depends on reskilling and upskilling of the Indian workforce. So skill mismatch is still a risk.
Interesting. Ramesh, so for the quarter, the stars were perfectly aligned, weren't they? Whether it comes to distribution, occupancy and leasing. Does that imply that you are on target, and I saw a figure here, to raise occupancy levels to 95% in fiscal 2026?
Today, we manage a big portfolio, more than 37 million square feet. GAV is close to 37,000 crores. That's the plan, to touch occupancy, take the occupancy to the 95% mark by the end of this financial year.
Understood. And then what does that imply then for the balance of the year, risk and reward, and where they are heading in terms of distribution? Can you keep up these rates of distribution and yield?
So distribution this quarter was very strong. We saw an 18% increase in distribution. Distribution used to be a concern of the analysts and our unit holders a couple of years back. In the last 3 quarters, we've given distribution increases of 38%, 11%, and 7.5%. So distribution shouldn't be a concern. Distribution growth shouldn't be a concern any longer.
Right, and acquisition profile was strong, Ramesh. So can you give us a bit more colour and bring us up to speed with the acquisition plans? I believe you outlined in late June when you were evaluating 5 new commercial properties in some key Indian cities. Where are you on those developments?
So we did our first third-party acquisition, Sri. This is from an institutional owner. There is an infrastructure improvement opportunity. Within the same acquisition opportunity, there is a core plus value add and opportunistic availability. This is in Hyderabad. Hyderabad, like you know, has emerged as the top GCC destination in the country, neck and neck competition to Bangalore. This also gives us an entry into financial district, which is a big micro market in Hyderabad. Today, our Hyderabad portfolio stands at 16 million square feet. The acquisition we just completed, that's at a cap rate of 9.9%. It's a 800,000 square feet asset, which we bought for nearly 510 crores. We're going to rename the asset as the Square 110 Financial District. This is the first third-party acquisition we have done in the last 5 years of our listing. And this is around a 12% discount from the valuation. So big opportunity for us, especially in a market like Hyderabad, which has 350 GCCs.
Exactly. And I just want to ask you to expand on that, Ramesh, because we had a really interesting conversation last week with Andhra's Chief Minister, Chandrababu Naidu. He's very committed to scaling the knowledge economy in his state. So where are the tech clusters emerging, in your opinion, on a state level that will build on the success of Bengaluru and Hyderabad?
Hyderabad is located in Telangana, which is the adjacent state to Andhra. The top 6 cities, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, Mumbai, Pune, and Delhi, continue to dominate. In the next level of cities, we see Visakhapatnam, Cochin, we see Trivandrum, Indore, Jaipur being the next set of cities which will do well.
Understood. Ramesh, and more broadly, and arguably this is out of your jurisdiction and your wheelhouse, but there is, I'd welcome your thoughts on the affordability crisis, especially amongst the middle class that are looking to move into the property ladder. We were speaking to an expert a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying that, look, what needs to be done by the government is to really consider building these mixed-use hubs outside the slums, redeveloping them, and looking at housing, looking at schools, looking at clinics, etc. Do you think that that is a model in which Mindspace REIT could be involved in, participate in the future?
Sri, ours is overall an office-focused REIT.
Yes.
I agree with you that the country need to be doing a lot more on the affordable housing segment. From our side, what we have done is it's very important to create mixed-use clusters. So we are creating more hotel campuses. We are creating more clubs. Our new club in Hyderabad, the Pearl Club, is opening in the next few months. We are creating more F&Bs. Our new F&B cluster in Airoli, what we named as Mindspace Fusion, that's just opened last month. We are creating more landscaping, more campus environments. We are creating more employee engagement. We won't be doing residential as part of the REIT, but today the good news is something like Navi Mumbai. We have close to 140,000 new units coming up in and around Navi Mumbai, which is going to help our Navi Mumbai parks.
Fantastic news, Ramesh. Thank you very much indeed for joining me on Inside India and breaking out those quarterly numbers and the path ahead for Mindspace REIT. We appreciate it. Ramesh Nair there from Mindspace REIT. Now, Vietnamese EV maker VinFast opened its first overseas factory in India yesterday. JP Ong has more details and joins me now. JP.
Good morning, Sri, and I want to get this pronunciation right, and apologies if I massacre the name of the name. The name of the town is Thoothukudi. It's a city in Tamil Nadu where VinFast has opened its latest facility, where they're expecting to initially produce up to 50,000 units a year. They do have the capacity to scale up to about 150,000 cars per year to service the Indian market. It also marks a serious foray, or at least a serious intent from VinFast to make Indonesia one of its India, that is, one of its major significant markets. Now, this also signifies a pivot, at least for VinFast, from the U.S. markets, where they were looking to make it a major market, that is, via the establishment of that plant in North Carolina, and they're now focusing on fast growth markets in this part of the world, such as India and Indonesia. Now, what's also interesting here, Sri, is that VinFast itself also said that they are looking to speak to domestic part suppliers in India, that is, to supply their factories there or their factory there, thus also signifying that they're looking to broaden their industrial footprint in India and also sourcing parts from there, when primarily they've been sourcing these parts from the likes of China and Vietnam. We'll see what this actually does for VinFast, but indeed it marks also a significant competitive shift for the upstart and ambitious Vietnamese car maker, which still is trying to diversify its sales mix at the moment, given the fact that about 90% of its sales still come from the Vietnamese market, and they're looking to tap countries like India, Indonesia, and the Philippines, among others, to try at least diversify this sales mix, at least for VinFast moving forward.
Thoothukudi, very good, JP. You'll be very welcome in Tamil Nadu. What about the competition for VinFast, though, in India as they look to expand in that market?
Well, so there are two aspects with regards to competition that might be interesting when you look at VinFast and the growing EV market in India. And it's important to note that EVs still make a fraction of total car sales in India, given the fact that ICE or combustion engines are still the dominant mode of transportation there. But it is fast growing, and they are actually facing a lot of competition from well-positioned domestic producers like Tata and MG Motor. What you'll notice here is the absence of Chinese producers, which have been gaining market share fast in other markets around the world. BYD, for instance, has seen its share grow to by a little bit less than half of a percentage point, and that's because there are constraints with regards to Chinese makers, Sri. Given the fact that BYD has offered to broaden its manufacturing base in India, this was actually shot down by Indian authorities because of what they called national security concerns, because there is still a bit of mistrust with regards to Chinese makers coming into India. Thus, BYD will be only constrained to producing 5,000 to 15,000 units per year, which means countries like Vietnam and VinFast, which doesn't have the same political overhang that Chinese makers have with regards to penetrating the Indian market, might be more well-positioned to come in and actually take market share. But the other thing they'll have to consider is this, Sri. The competition for VinFast might not just be coming from Indian makers. It also could be coming from Hyundai, which is a distant fifth at the moment. But what Hyundai has actually is a significant dealership network. So if Hyundai wanted to come in and actually start to deepen its foray and its presence, at least in the EV space there, they could tap their dealership network of over 1,400 dealers across the country. What's important to note about India here, Sri, is that it's not just important to have a manufacturing base in India. You also have to have the dealership network that can really penetrate and spread across the subcontinent. So far, VinFast has plans to only expand up to 35 dealerships, that is, to 35 dealerships across India for 2025. But again, you're going to compete with the likes, for instance, of Maruti, which has about over 2,000 dealerships, according to Cardeco, and also the likes, for instance, of Tata, which also has dealerships of over 1,000 at the moment. So for VinFast, the goal here and the challenge isn't just to sustainably grow its manufacturing footprint in India, but also the dealership network, because how you're going to reach these buyers is going to be as important as how quickly you can manufacture and actually start to gain market share from a fast-growing and fast-evolving EV market that is India, Sri.
It is going to be quite the bun fight when they're going up against the mighty Maruti, aren't they, JP? So what segment of the market is VinFast targeting in India? Is it mass market, is it mid-tier or the high end?
Well, I think at the moment you will have to compete, at least with regards to what's called affordable cars there, Sri, given the fact that India, while it is a fast-growing EV market, is also very price-sensitive. One of the reasons some have actually said that Hyundai's been having difficulties or challenges in terms of enlarging its market share also is because they're not as competitively priced as some of the other makers in India. But we have noted that Vietnam itself, or VinFast itself, has their electric cars priced at certain levels close to that of some of the stalwarts in the U.S., for instance. That might make it challenging actually for them if they come in to India and actually maintain the price points that they have in other markets. But this also, Sri, highlights why it's important for the likes of VinFast to actually deepen and diversify its supply chain to include domestic Indian suppliers, because that could also mean that they could lower the cost and compete more effectively against the likes of Tata, for instance, and MG. So again, this is a very, very tall task actually for VinFast to try at least capture a significant market share in India. But so far they're laying at least a strong first note with that manufacturing facility. But again, establishing the dealerships and making sure that they're price competitive are going to be important if they want to stay and survive and thrive in this market.
JP, thank you. Very good pronunciation, by the way. And
thank you, sir.
some history, 16th century, when the Portuguese were knocking around there, it was called Tutti Corin. JP, Romba Nana, Romba thanks. Right, a bit of Tamil there as well, saying true to our Dravidian roots. Right, staying on the subject of foreign firms in India, JSW Steel has found a new partner in Japan's JFE. Lin Lin is here to tell us more.
Yeah, multinationals want a piece of India, it seems. So we've got this strategic partnership between these two steel makers, JFE and JSW. They've announced a 50-50 JV to increase electrical steel output in the country. So this is the kind of steel that is the core material for transformers as well as as generators that's used for the power grid, for data centers, for EVs. So some really key growth areas as well ahead for India. The investment is close to $670 million. And we have a map which we can show our viewers as well. It's in relation to two key plants, one in Western India, which was actually just purchased from German company ThyssenKrupp, and another in the south as well. Collectively, we should see that production capacity for electrical steel scale up from 110,000 tonnes at the moment to about 350,000 by fiscal 2028. Now, for JFE, I should say, which is the Japanese steel maker, this is crucial because we know that when we look at the Japanese domestic market, that is a shrinking market. Steel demand is shrinking, just like with Nippon Steel. Many of these companies are looking at the US as that key developed market for expansion, and then in India as the developing market here. And that is certainly the case here for JFE Holdings as well. And they really have been seeing as well, when you look at their earnings last night when it was released, that there was a pretty steep fall when it comes to Q1 profit. And the company has cited, for example, that they've seen margin compression in terms of their exports. No doubt these are some of the companies that are tackling the 50% tariff in terms of US import of steel as well. And then for the Indian company's perspective, we know that when it comes to electrical steel, most of it at the moment is coming from imports. So this is, focus on that self-reliance again and localized production. And for JSW's perspective as well, it will mean technology transfer, right? So we're talking about a Japanese company that can provide a lot of the technology and know-how when it comes to, these sorts of greener steel production.
And this is electrical steel that goes into electrical transformers, not Optimus Prime or Bumblebee, of course. Lynn, thank you very much indeed for that, but you knew that, just testing. Right, Indian markets have joined the trading day. We'll look at some movers in Mumbai after this short break. We are back in 2 minutes. Let's give you a snapshot of the Indian markets, which have just come online. We're about 10 minutes or so into the trading day, and all things considered, putting on a brave face despite all the negative tariff headlines related to Russia, especially. Nifty 50, the benchmark at 24,685, down just by a fraction. However, the rupee is looking softer against the US dollar at 87,776. Let's take a look at oil companies listed in Mumbai and how they're reacting to President Trump's tariff threat on India for buying Russian energy. All of them down, with a few exceptions. Castrol, Vedanta and Chennai Petroleum in the plus column. All of them having, with those exceptions, having a fairly rough day at this stage. In the meantime, China's Ant Group is exiting India's Paytm. The group plans to sell its stake in the Indian fintech firm via block deals that could total around $434 million. According to term sheet, floor price for Ant Group's 5.84% stake in Paytm has been set at 1,020 rupees per share. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway and Japan's SoftBank have also exited the fintech firm in the last 2 years. Shares of Paytm or 197 Communications are looking like this, off just fractionally by about 0.3%. In the IPO space now, Tata Sons-backed financial services firm Tata Capital is heading to the public markets, according to draft papers filed on Monday. The offering will include 210 million new shares, while existing shareholders will sell up to 260 million shares. And Tata Sons will offload a bulk of those proceeds from the fresh issue to fund future capital needs, including lending. Moving on to cricket now, before we wrap up the show. The India versus England Test match series ended with one of the most dramatic wins in the format's history. The opponents battled it out till the very last day of the match, with India then snatching a nail-biting victory by just 6 runs. The series ended in a 2-2 draw. Well done, lads. That's all the time that we have today on Inside India. Do keep watching CNBC. Access Middle East is up next.